tonight's listening session. First item on our agenda is the joint meeting of the Board of Supervisors and the Planning and Zoning Commission is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda presented?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
A second. I have a motion by Supervisor Jorgensen, second by Kiefer to approve tonight's agenda. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Second item. Hear public comments regarding topics and issues for the county to consider for utility scale wind energy development and battery storage amendments to the Floyd County zoning ordinance. We don't have a program. We're just here to hear comments, questions from citizens regarding the topic of making amendments to our existing ordinance. So we'll recognize any speaker who'd like to be recognized. Just please, if you'd like to be recognized, raise your hand, identify yourself, your name, so the auditor can keep track of that. And we're here to hear your remarks tonight. This is kind of the microphone for the evening. And so it's duly installed, and we think we can, there are people online can attend this meeting as well. So we open the floor for any public comments or questions.
Mark, I'll just introduce myself here once again. So again, my name's John Robbins. I'm with North Iowa Area Council of Governments, also known as NIACOG. Floyd County is a member of, basically we're a planning organization for the 8-county region. We're kind of a we're not really state government at all, but we're sort of a regional planning agency that assists counties and cities with things such as zoning, grant writing, a whole slew of things. We also operate Region 2 Transit. If you haven't taken public transportation in our area, that is out of our office as well. So Floyd County has hired us, or hired me, to assist with amending the ordinance related to utility scale wind turbines and battery storage. Battery storage is becoming more of a popular thing. It's more economical now, so those are becoming part of you know, wind development, solar development at the utility scale as well. Basically they look like almost like a semi-trailer that are parked usually around a substation. So that's kind of a newer thing, so we're also inputting that into the ordinance as well. So we're here to just take your comments, hear about your concerns, support. If you have questions also, we're here to try to answer those the best we can too. So if you have questions about, there's a whole slew of topics. It can get quite complicated very quickly. You probably have been possibly talking with, well, wind developer wind agents as well. We're not doing that specifically because of that, but also we are because it should be regular. So with that, if you want to have any comments, questions, feel free to raise your hand. We'll call on you and take your comment and your questions. So,
John, I would like to just introduce Michael.
Oh, sure.
People here on my right, I'm planning and zone, we're the planning and zoning commission. On my right is Candy Brandell Larson, Guy Carpenter, Ben Ridinghouse. One of our board members was not able to make it this evening, Dan Black. And my name is DJ.
yeah, I apologize about that.
No.
Yeah, so we're doing a joint meeting because the ordinance process involves the Planning and Zoning Commission and Board of Supervisors. Planning and Zoning Commission's role is to kind of be part of the study phase. They also will eventually develop a draft. We'll have additional public hearings for the public to have the opportunity to also look at that and make comments during those public hearings. With the board first it'll go to Planning and Zoning Commission for a recommendation. They're an advisory body. They don't make any decisions. And then it'll go to the Board of Supervisors eventually with another public hearing, and there'll be notifications in the paper and it'll be posted on the county website. So keep your eyes on that as well. So just to kind of outline the process a little bit, I appreciate you speaking up there, Dean. And I guess with that, we'll open it up for comment. So, if you have questions or any comments related to wind turbines, and the regulation of wind turbines, so this will be an amendment to the zoning. So, and maybe there might not be a lot of comments, but feel free.
Scott Larson, so what type of setbacks are we looking at on these wind turbines and how the battery's going to be handled? Is there linings that are going inside of these trailers to keep the acid if it ever breaks or have issues with it? What are some of those?
Sure. Are you asking just about the battery storage or the?
Battery
and the wind
storage.
turbines?
Wind turbines, setbacks, what our setbacks would be.
Sure. So with the wind turbine, I'll start with the wind turbine side. So, that's, with wind turbine, industrial, maybe that's the wrong term, utility scale wind turbines, I should say. There's various types of setbacks. So a setback is the distance from the base of the turbine to a particular point as it would be regulated. So, with a wind turbine, there usually is, certain various types of setbacks that apply. One of the first most common ones is going to be, a setback from a road right of way or like highway, private road, that kind of thing. Also utility lines, another term you'll see is non-participating property line. And so those tend to be the same type of setback, and usually, a fairly, common, requirement is for a given height. And when I say height, I mean from the bottom of the turbine to the tallest point of the rotation of the blades that are turning. So the highest point that it will ever reach in its rotation, or the apex. The height of that for every foot, at least 1.1 feet is fairly common. The board and the commission may choose a different, maybe more strict one sometimes. So you usually see it in that 1.1 to 1.2 or 110% of the height or 120% of the height for that type of requirement. So that's one type of setback that might be considered in the ordinance. Another one might be, distance from a residence or a dwelling. So that is typically going to be, it varies fairly widely from county to county, I will say. Typically, like, for example, there's an organization called Iowa Environmental Council that is housed at the University of Northern Iowa. They recommend at least 1,000 to 1,250 feet from a residence, from the base of the turbine to the nearest point of the house. So that type of setback is fairly common. And then some counties have more stringent further distances. So that's fairly common as well. Another one, and then there might be other types of ones, like from a residential district, like from a zoning district. It is pretty similar to usually from like a house. Another one might be, from like a conservation area as well, that can range from like 600 feet to a quarter mile, I've seen, and those do vary, I will say. So we don't have we haven't decided on anything. We're trying to learn at this point. We've held a few workshops with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Board of Supervisors. That's why we're doing this jointly, because they're both part of that process. So those are some of the common ones. I hope that helps. And there may be other types we consider, as we kind of get a draft going and start workshopping the draft. It'll be a fairly dynamic process, so there will be certain requirements that, we'll have those in there no matter what, but from a setback standpoint, those are some of the more common types. For battery storage, we're still kind of in that learning process. I've seen, and maybe some of the wind developers can enlighten us a little bit on what's more common. I'm a little newer to that type of regulation because it's more newer type of use, but I've seen at least 100 feet, maybe, and that would be like from a property line, possibly. I might be wrong on that. But we'll be workshopping. We're kind of learning this a little bit as we go too. So we'll be preparing a draft with some setbacks, but, there's some noise considerations when it comes to setbacks with just like the HVAC systems that are included in those units. And, if there's any developers in the room and I say some misinformation, please feel free to raise your hand and correct me. So those will become some things we consider. They tend not to be as extreme or as far as like a wind turbine, just given the nature of their size. They're about, again, about the size of a trailer of a semi truck. So is that helpful? Kind of help answer some of those questions. So. Anybody have any comments or questions? This is all for you, so, I could review some of the more common types of requirements, that we've covered in some of our, workshops, if that would be beneficial too, so.
So what about ice throw off the blades? You know,
Sure.
ice coming off and landing.
Yep, ice throw, again, your primary, method is setbacks. Oftentimes, setback from like a road, from a non-participating property line is sufficient for the ice throw, to my understanding. Most counties, don't have more law because of the ice throw, potential ice throw, don't have further setback requirements, because that tends to be sufficient for that type of concern, to my understanding. So. Yeah, another thing, yeah, like with like setbacks, that setbacks address is, another common thing, concerns are like shadow flicker or noise. So with like noise, some noise, will be generated just from the movement of wind through the blades as it moves. It'll be sort of a whoosh sound. Also, there will also be, just mechanical noise as well, so it might sound like from a distance, like a light AC unit or something like that. And so, some counties don't necessarily specifically have noise requirements. They'll do it just using the like setback distances from houses and things like that. Some will regulate noise, and usually that'll be in decibels. So, for example, usually in the range, most common for counties that do regulate, noise in Iowa, it's can't be louder than 50 to 60 decibels, depending on the county. And generally, just to give you sort of an idea, 45 decibels is typical, like, noise levels, of like just out in out in the rural area without, or a typical household noise, I should say. That's generally where, and so we're talking, if we do have specific, if we decide upon specific like noise levels, it would probably be somewhere in that range, and we'll be discussing that as we workshop a draft. Shadow flicker is, what is shadow flicker? Shadow flicker is the sort of the projection of the shadow as the blades move. And that can be quite, annoying through like a closed or like a window or small opening. So typically, how that is regulated, is measured in hours per year. And sort of, industry standard is that a, shadow flicker shouldn't, impact a house, greater than 30 hours per year. So that's spread across, the duration of that potential shadow flicker over the time frame of a year. So then that'll vary depending on the time of year, you know, with angle of the earth and all that sort of stuff. I'm not a scientist, but it'll be about minutes per day. It can be, or it might not, certain times of year might be 0 minutes a day. So then there's a net, usually if shadow flicker is regulated by a county, it will, that's pretty standard actually, to use 30 hours per year. That's very common. There might be a couple counties that diverge from that. That's another, one of the more major things that is also regulated in the county ordinance as well. So hopefully that, help with that. Trying to be as thorough as possible, but while also respecting your time. Um, Any other questions or comments?
So my name is Thomas Bean, I'm with the Liberty Coalition. Some of you might be familiar with us. We work across the state, county level with stakeholders and landowners, focus on an all of the above approach to energy development here in Iowa, and focus on preservation of property rights for landowners and farmers. I've got a little guidebook I can give you guys that has some examples and kind of recommendations for a workable ordinance that protects the community, as well as preserving the opportunity for landowners to have a turbine on their land to setting up community for them, should they choose. There's some example counties in there along the lines of what. One, and as well, setback waivers for participating landowners if they'd like to voluntarily sign a waiver that would go through the county level as well, and the attorney would lower those setbacks as well, but the focus, as you can see on the front, is a common ground ordinance guide, so that it protects community, but also keeps the county open for business and for landowners. So, just as you guys are going through it, has some middle ground approach to it. That's seen a lot of success throughout the state, and something that I hope you guys will take a look at. And if you have any further questions, my contact information is on the back. Feel free to reach out, email, phone. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
What's the length of these blades gonna be?
What's your name, sir?
Mike,
Mike. And last name, sorry.
Mike,
Okay. Length of the blades will depend on the particular developer. So they'll propose certain model. Usually when it comes to the ordinance itself, there'll be like a ground clearance requirement, so they can't be so far like at the lowest point of the rotation. They have to be at least a certain height. But county to county, that requirement varies quite a bit. I've seen as low as 12 foot from the ground in Boone County. And then some are as high as about 70 foot.
Boone, speak about Boone, Boone is the biggest set of wind towers here in Iowa right now.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Boone is actually, they brought the wind towers in there. They brought them in, the blades themselves come in 3 pieces.
Oh,
They
okay,
actually had 4 trailers on it, because you put about a 10-foot extension on the end of them.
gotcha. Yeah, so when it comes to like a particular proposal, the county, I mean, they'll review it based on the requirements they develop in this ordinance amendment. Again, Boone County is the lowest requirement I've seen as far as ground clearance height for the blades. At 12 foot, so that means has the lowest portion of that blade rotation can only be as high, or has to be at least as high as 12 foot in that county in particular. We haven't made it, we're still in the study phase for this ordinance amendment, obviously. I guess I would invite if any of the developers in the room do want to speak to their specific project. I don't see a problem with them sharing that if they have any decisions, but a lot of them are early in the process, so they might not have made that decision, so.
It's just like which style of towers is gonna go up to, there's like 3 different styles too.
Yeah, when they make an application with the county, once they have adopted an ordinance, they'll be having that information, they'll have to typically provide, the information about the tower models and heights and blade length and all that sort of thing with the application. With this ordinance amendment, we're not considering any specific proposal, the county's more concerned about properly regulating any proposal that could come in. So that's what this ordinance is trying to regulate. So we just don't have any specific proposals we're responding to for the currently.
So is 90 to 120 feet per blade reasonable?
Possibly,
He's
like,
pretty close on
I
it.
mean, reasonable is in the eye of the beholder. I think when we.
What I meant is it
yeah.
covered most turbines.
Yeah, I think they usually measure it in the, yeah, feel free to elaborate
So-
there. Isaac.
My name's Isaac Lampa. I'm with Invenergy, which is one of the project developers that is actively signing easements within the county. We just built the Chickasaw Wind Energy Center just north of New Hampton.
Oh, you were Bilstein,
Northeast of here.
you were Bilstein there doing it.
Okay.
I know the farm, I was on it.
Okay, and so, our blades there would, we haven't, this project is too early stage for us we haven't turbines or anything like that yet. We likely won't for a few years, but the blade length at the Chickasaw projects, was about 200, maybe a little bit less than 200 feet. So just to let you know that example, so.
If I remember right, that one's got 3 different styles of turbines on it too, doesn't it?
So that one has 56 turbines that are 3.1 megawatt Siemens Gamesa renewable energy turbines, and then 8 turbines that are GE turbines that are 2.82 megawatts. And then we have 2 different hub heights on our Siemens Gamesa ones. So yes, we do have 3 different types.
Yeah, it's like there was over there.
Isaac, just one more time, could you say the blade range one more time? Like, what's a typical length of a blade?
I mean, I would say 90 to 250 feet or so. The ones at Chickasaw are about 190.
That's good to know.
Is that length or circumference? I'm sorry, length or diameter?
Oh, length.
Single one.
Yeah.
And also, I should have probably said this up front too. This is the first of 2 we're doing, of these listening sessions. So if you have more questions or comments you may want to make in the future, we're gonna be doing one next week, at a minimum, I will say. I will be conferring with the supervisors how we want to move forward with this study process. That'll be Wednesday next week on the 21st, at the Emergency Operations Center at the courthouse. So just want to make sure you're all aware of that as well. We're trying to have a very transparent process on how this ordinance amendment comes about. We already had one listening session prior to this, which more was like similar to this, it ended up being a lot of questions, which we understand the process and those sorts of things. I'm happy to answer any questions again, at the best I can. Some things we don't know yet because we're trying to figure out, educate the Planning and Zoning Commission about how wind turbines and battery storage is regulated. But also, so I just want to make sure you're aware that you have that comment opportunity. And it's just gonna be like this. We're gonna be listening to you, listen to your concerns, your comments and your questions.
John, isn't it that FAA regulates the total height cannot be over 500 feet?
Not quite. So the FAA, Aviation Administration regulates, whether tower, and this can be any structure really, over 200 feet, whether it impedes air traffic or planes coming into the Charles City Airport in particular. And so it has to go through a review process, to determine whether it would be a potential hazard to air traffic safety. So it's gonna be based on federal the FAA's requirements, and review a whole host of things related to that. So any tower has to go through that review, usually about a 90-day review process, and any developer will have to submit a application for a particular location. They'll submit a whole host of details such as height, and lighting, things like that. And they need to even be able to build under federal regulation, they have to get what's called a determination of no hazard, saying it will not be. So that's not dictating the actual height. That said, the local ordinance could potentially have a max height, stipulated in ordinance, and that might be something we consider. And most counties do have, I've only seen one county that I can recall offhand that has regulated a max height, which is Winona County at 600 feet. They, again, yeah, so it's regulated by the FAA. Another thing is like lighting, so those red lights, that, are at the top, those are required on at least maybe not every turbine, but, usually most turbines, as I understand it. There's also new technology, I'm gonna probably mess this up, but it's,
ADLS,
ADLS, air.
air traffic detection lighting.
Thank you. Way to memorize that. So that technology is able to detect airplanes within, I believe, 3 miles. And those lights would actually be off if it's allowed by the FAA. So we have to defer to the FAA standards because they have some, anything that conflicts goes to the most restrictive requirement. So, meaning, so if a particular wind farm is able to have that ADLS lighting, those lights won't go on unless there's an airplane within a certain distance that radar system detects. So it'd only go on, I've heard, only probably less than 1% of the time in that case, particularly in a rural area. That will be something we consider for this ordinance, but we can't say only if it has ADLS system. We'd have to say something like if the FAA lets them, more or less. So that's something to also keep in mind. That's a new kind of technology that is just starting to be implemented into ordinances and any like wind farm, particularly proposed wind farm, so.
Mike Sinning here, was wondering, so we get dozens of towers put up. How do we get the electricity away from the tower and to public? I mean,
Sure.
is this something else you're looking at? Is the
Correct, yeah, so there's always going to be transmission lines involved with any wind farm, and those are typically buried, right? And that's usually at a depth of about 4 feet, but there's other things that have to be considered, like drainage tile, for example, so they're gonna have to. And that's gonna be another thing that's regulated too, so if they damage, if any particular developer damages a tile during construction, or the weight of the turbine damages it, and that can be shown. They'll be required, this will be in the ordinance, I can tell you that they will be required to repair or reroute any tile that could potentially, or that does damage, a drainage tile. And then also the county auditor's office also administers to there's state code that regulates this too, so. That's almost redundant when we put it in the ordinance, but we will put that in the ordinance as well, for sure.
so is this going down?
Oh, yeah, I apologize. Yeah, so with the application, they'll submit site plans where all those lines are going. Cause they have to also consider like floodplains, decommissioning. So decommissioning is a removal requirement within a specified time. So another thing that will be in the ordinance is the county will adamantly recommend this to the county. They have to have a decommissioning plan and possibly an agreement with the county on at the end of the quote useful life of that turbine, when it's done, more or less, has to be usually removed with typically 180 days, 6 months, something like that. Give them a time frame, and then they'll give you a set of procedures they'll follow. And then typically, an ordinance is required. This is pretty universal, that all infrastructure that is underground will be removed from a depth to a depth of 4 feet. Those turbines have foundations that go probably 50 feet or something like that. I might be wrong on that depth, but so you're not gonna remove the entirety of that, but you'll take it out, take out usually it'll be recycled for aggregate and then replaced with topsoil so it can be farmed in the future. So hopefully that answers your question well enough.
Transmission lines to the public. I think.
Oh, transmission line, so they'll go feed to, usually with a wind farm of a good size, it'll have to include a substation. And so that substation will connect to the grid at large and be fed to wherever the demand is. So, sorry, I'm trying to make sure I am thorough enough for you. So. Yeah, sir.
Cover Mike's yardage. Mike had yardage about 600 yards in that base. There's about 600 yards in that base.
Oh, I see. Okay, gotcha. Yep. Yeah, that's quite extensive, so. Yes.
Yeah, hi, my name is Rachel Eason. I'm here on behalf of Power Up Iowa, and I just have some economic development numbers I wanted to share with you here. Talking a little bit about how wind energy can help Floyd County. This proposed Marble Ridge Wind Project can bring up to $171 million in tax revenue and land lease payments to the community over the project's lifetime. This is going to bring development and improvement to public schools, roads, emergency services to the county, all without increasing tax rates for residents. Across the state of Iowa, renewable energy has generated $61.5 million in local and state revenue, and has paid $73.4 million in land lease payments for family farms in 2022 alone. This project stands to provide 300 jobs during construction and creates 8 permanent jobs for operation and maintenance going forward. We can look to neighboring Mitchell County as an example of the benefits that wind energy has to offer. From 2013 to 2019, the taxable valuation in the county went up by nearly 18% due to the wind farm there. And it's now currently the leading entity and largest taxpayer in the county. So far, it's generated over $2 million a year for roads and bridges and has paid for a new county courthouse, all without raising taxes. The school budget has grown by $3.5 million over the span of 5 years, all as a result of wind energy. We encourage the Floyd County Planning and Zoning Commission to recommend a fair revision of the current zoning ordinance on wind energy, and the Board of Supervisors to uphold the fair revision to allow for wind energy development in the county and the benefits that come with it. Thank you.
Sure.
Ross Tato, I have a question for the supervisors. It doesn't really affect all this, but is there gonna be an extra tax if you put up windmills on that property? Or will the taxes on the piece of land stay the same? I've heard discussions about that, and I was just curious if I have a windmill or he has one, or we get taxed more than what we would have.
I don't believe so. I think not.
Okay.
I speak from personal experience on that.
Oh, that's right, you do have some, don't you?
No,
So typically any new property taxes that
They will
are,
stay the same unless they go up or down.
there
like-
is taxes, but it's usually on the developer.
On the
That
developer.
owns the turbine,
Okay.
so I may not get this exactly right.
Mhm.
So usually your land taxes are gonna be taxed however the assessor is gonna tax it. Wind turbines at the utility scale, are usually by a special assessment on something called net acquisition value. Which is, I'm not sure exactly what is that, maybe I can, defer to one of the developers to explain that a little bit, but there's usually, that's calculated and there's usually a schedule on that percent of that net acquisition value. Up to 30% is pretty typical in Iowa. That was established back, I wanna say in the late 80s or the 90s. And there's like a schedule for 7 years, starts at 0% of that net acquisition value. Most counties in Iowa have adopted that, schedule. And then it'll go up by 5% each year, up to 30% of net acquisition value. I'm just doing a summary on that, so don't quote me on that, but that tax is assessed to the developer, not to the landowner. But a landowner will be taxed on the land itself, typically. So, yeah, that should, no new turbine should result in new taxes on the turbine to the landowner. That is. Yes, sir.
Larry Schubert. I'm a farmer. I have a little land in Saragota. I have a fair amount, or in Floyd County, I have some in Saragota. This to address this drought here. The first bunch dug a couple holes and I didn't get involved. One's been covered up because that company went bankrupt. I was hit on another company that I'm not sure why, but they wanted 20 feet along my fence. So I was gun shy why they needed 20 feet along my fence. And another one showed up and said, we don't build on CRP because we don't like to deal with the government on that. And so I'm not totally against windmills, but I've turned down windmills myself, but I had several of them if I wanted to. I'm next to a transmission line. I could have been involved in one in Chickasaw County. First, they hit me up, they wanted to put one on a farm and I turned them down. And then they wanted to come on another one and I turned them down. And on the third one, they wanted a friendly agreement because they wanted to come up and they come up along the fence line of a piece of ground that I have. Went out in the field a ways and put a windmill up. And I had an agreement. I've never signed it. They said they needed that agreement to put that tower there. So I'm not overly trusting of any windmill company. That's to address you people. I question tile when I have land that I don't know where the tile is. When you're dealing with electrical lines, it's a concern to me. They're very hard to find, they're very hard to fix. And so just general comments to you, that's very cautionary on these things. This is what I've encountered personally. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like we do have a couple people on the computer. If you do have questions, feel free to ask them or make comment. Just make sure you're unmuted if you do have a question. If not, that's fine too.
Jeff Henningsville. What's your timetable on when this ordinance gets written and signed into law or? And then which of our sister counties in the Nyakog area already have these ordinances written around this?
Sure. So time frame, it's a little flexible, I will say. We've been in about month and a half or 2 months so far. We've done a couple workshops. The first one of those was, we just kind of sat, these were all open to the public too, and were posted. We sat with we had a joint session with these two bodies, just kind of went over the various topics, some of which we've talked about tonight a little bit. And just kind of the different things we could regulate. That was the first workshop that we did. Then we also did a listening session where we had some turnout, but it was ended up being mostly a question and answer. A developer, Invenergy, also spoke for about 10 minutes to discuss their project and how various requirements impact their potential project. Then we did another workshop a couple weeks ago on the 29th of January. And that was, we had Alliant Energy and Mid-American Energy that don't have any interest in, they're not currently developing any wind farms or battery projects in this area. And they first, Alliant spoke on, just how is a wind farm developed, like generally, what are all the things we have to consider? Those kind of things. I believe those minutes are also available on the county website, right, Gloria? So if you ever want to review these are on the website, the minutes are. And so this was the next thing we did, so, and again, we do have another, listening session next week on Wednesday, so you're welcome to attend and encouraged to attend if you do have any additional comments or questions that you think of between now and then. From there, we're gonna just kind of sit down with the supervisors at one of the supervisors meetings. We haven't officially talked about this, but I'm just gonna assess where we're at and, if they feel they need to learn some additional things. If we want to hold additional listening sessions, those kind of things. So we're gonna have that discussion, so it's quite a dynamic process. In the meantime, I'm starting to work up a draft based on kind of some of the things that I'll hear from them. And we'll kind of workshop it eventually and have, public hearings like I explained earlier. Again, we'll have the draft, at the specific draft that we want to consider, we'll have to go through the Planning and Zoning Commission for study and recommendation, and they may recommend changes that I'll change before the Board of Supervisors. And then we'll have an official hearing before the Board of Supervisors. So this is an ordinance amendment. So by law, by default, it's supposed to have 3 readings. So if we make changes, we'll change the draft, go to another reading. They also may waive those readings if they're comfortable with where we're at. Again, these will be public hearings, so we'll have open comment for the public as well during that. So we're trying to be very transparent, but we're just not sure. But we estimated originally 4 to 6 months. We're at about 2 months right now. So it just kind of depends on how many changes, if we want to do further workshops, and that takes time to put together and do notices for the paper and the website and all that sort of thing. So that's kind of where we're at. Hopefully that answered your question well enough.
I can maybe add a little bit.
Sure.
On November 20th, the Board of Supervisors approved a resolution with a moratorium on the turbines that was effective for a period of 6 months. And from the day that it becomes effective until May 20th, 2024. With an extension if they need to, hopefully to have it done by July 1st, 2024.
And do a lot of counties already have these ordinances written around?
Sure, so there's counties in various stages or, so Nyakog goes as far west as Cassuth County. They've had an I will say most of these counties have had an ordinance in place, but it was more typically how a wind farm is regulated in Iowa. It's what you call a conditional use. They usually have conditional use permit requirements. The old school way of doing things is, they just listed it as a special use category without having the minimum requirements in the ordinance. So.
And that's what all our.
Yeah, that's what, I should say most, not all. So some various counties in our area some have amended recently, and some are in process and some haven't really thought of it, I'm not sure, but, I know Cassuth County has been in place for the most part in its current form. I think they've done some amendments since to that ordinance for several years, probably prior to 2020 at least. Worth County did an ordinance amendment, within the last few years. They had more of a unique situation because they only zone a part of their county or the land area of their county. So it's kind of unique. I don't know if they're really comparable to Franklin or to Floyd County, excuse me, where most counties regulate the entire zone, but entirely. Franklin County recently amended their ordinance not too long ago. Saragordo County is currently in the process of amending their ordinance with I guess, full disclosure, I was the former zoning administrator for Saragordo County before I went over to Nyakog. So they're in that process right now. I think Mitchell County may be considering theirs right now. And the other ones, let's see, am I missing? Winnebago County and Hancock County, I'm not sure, to be honest, where they're at.
Marty, it's Marty.
Yeah.
Jeff.
Marty's my brother.
give us an email address, or we can print it off at November 20th.
I can go find it, Mark.
We've got it right here.
Oh,
And
okay.
it lays out the dates that Auditor Carr mentioned, and our plan is to get a recommendation, from the zoning commission, by May 20th, if not May 20th, by the 1st of July.
And it sounds like everybody is kind of in the same process that you guys are, where they're updating their amendments to build more wind farms, so it's like all around us.
But Chickasaw County doesn't have zoning, so they don't have a.
Yeah.
It's kind of,
Yeah, if you don't have a zoning ordinance, you can adopt a standalone ordinance as well. Some counties have adopted like a separate ordinance, but it's still, they still have zoning, so it's still part of their zoning ordinance, kind of weird, but each county kind of chooses how they do. Iowa doesn't have a statewide regulation of wind turbines, except for certain things.
gotcha.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, I'll get you that.
but we also will be referring to, using other counties as references too, so.
Jeff, we've got a copy here of the agreement between the developer and Chickasaw County also. It does follow a lot of the criteria that a lot of ordinances have. Even though Chickasaw County does not have zoning, their agreement, I have to admit, is a relatively strict.
Yeah, Chickasaw County with Invenergy, they did a separate developer agreement. With them before they built that specific one, so that's kind of unique in that they didn't have zoning.
Right.
So that's why that's separate one, so that was kind of a way, I guess, of the developer checking themselves in some ways, so I think it's kind of standard practice for that company, so. And I may be wrong, feel free to speak if I'm wrong, I don't mean to speak.
I can answer any questions after, the Chickasaw project or Invenergy too, if anyone wants to ask.
So.
Just so you're aware, those dates are important, and we spent a lot of time discussing that when we passed that resolution, because if the zoning commission has not made a recommendation to the board on a amendment to a zoning ordinance by July 1st, what we passed was the board shall have the right, but not be required to develop a development agreement with an individual wind turbine company. So there is definitely a time certain out there that we're trying to get it done, because we feel it's an important initiative for Floyd County, and that's why we're holding these meetings. And so that what we're doing.
And as the person that will be writing the drafts and so forth, I very much intend to try to be done well before July 1st, but if we need to take the time to do further study, we're gonna take that time.
Jeff, just so you know, I'm in agreement with the board of supervisors on this too. I don't want this dragging on.
Well, yeah, and I heard a developer say years out, so if you're gonna do something, we probably should go.
Yep, that's why we're doing this process right now, because it's important to hear from the public. We need to get your input about what you may be concerned about, what we should address in an ordinance, and just educate you if you have questions, of course. That's very important as well. So. Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you, John. I'm Mike Carberry. I'm with the Bright Future Iowa organization. My boss here is Swati Dandekar, and Swati is a former school board member, House member, state senate. She was on the Iowa Utilities Board. I formerly served as a supervisor for Johnson County, and I've been a renewable energy lobbyist for 25 years. Which I met Supervisor Kuhn many moons ago in Des Moines. I really appreciate you going through this process. Public transparency is wonderful. Iowa is a leader in the nation in wind energy, and it got there by doing good projects, and good projects come from good policy. And that's what you're all doing here is good policy. Well, there's some good ways to do this and bad ways to do it. You're doing it a good way. You already mentioned Iowa Environmental Council. There's other places also that have what model ordinances in wind. The Great Plains Institute, Iowa Environmental Council, Center for Rural Affairs. One thing about all those is that those ordinances are ones where everybody wins. That the taxpayers the landowners, the neighbors, the utilities, the developer. They all win if the project is done right. If somebody cuts corners, then not everybody is happy. So we really appreciate you doing it this way. We are here to help. I see other folks like Thomas is here, the Power Up people here. We could talk about property rights, we could talk about all these things, but you're doing a great job. The open process, and if you need any help, there's a lot of people that can help you. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You've got other documents. People have done this before. It's not rocket science. And we don't need to, we can cut and paste, or beg, borrow, and steal, if you will. The idea that there's good ordinances and they're easy to find. You're doing a great job. So thank you, and I appreciate your time this evening, and look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Yep, I assure you, we will be stealing all the time from all. Any other comments or questions?
Is there anybody on the phone?
Yeah, does the board or the commission have questions too? Feel free. Oh, on the phone, I apologize. Do we have anybody on the phone? Paper. Anybody on the computer, Zoom, have any questions?
I have a suggestion. Mike has worked and actually installed turbines, so it might be nice to hear some more of his, like what he's experienced.
Sure.
Right, Mike?
I've worked, I worked with Control Concrete, I've poured a lot of these.
Oh, okay.
This is number 4 that I've done with the Chickasaw project.
Yeah, Mike, feel free to give me your contact info after we're done here.
Yeah, no problem.
Bring it up if you want.
So I'll be honest, working with the crew they had there, Bilstein was actually a good crew to work with. I cannot say nothing bad about them. I mean, safety wise, they were above and beyond. Like for turnaround areas for me, for Bilstein wise, yeah, I could actually pretty much got a racetrack there with them guys, cause they had it big enough, you could pull 2 trucks in, 3 trucks in one shot. White, I don't know if you dealt with White before, White Construction or AEI. Okay, AEI, you back in, I mean, there's different things about them. Each company that I've worked with, for them, I mean, what do you wanna know about them? White's they're all safety conscious on it. Actually, I think Bilstein was the first one I ever seen get it done on time. They're actually up and running, they're on.
Our Chickasaw project is running, yeah.
Yeah.
We started last March, 2023, and then started operations in December of 23.
What do you wanna know?
I don't know offhand, but I could take your number and give you a call if we do have questions, so.
There's a lot, it said there's a lot of things here,
Yeah.
Katie's got the worst one, she's got most of the land around the area. And where they're gonna I know they're gonna come and ask you on stuff because your family's got quite a bit of land. And money says there'll be a laydown yard, they'll come talk to you about a laydown yard and probably a place for, like if we get the project for concrete wise, where we'll be setting a portable plant up for you. I mean, like the landowner, like if it's for you, and believe me, I've been out to your son's house lately quite a bit. Don't get a deal, you get a little bit better deal on concrete because we'll have a plant set.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, there's good things about them, as I said, like I knew, the Boone project, I know the Boone project is really good.
Oh, okay.
That's when I said, when I watch towers come in every day. You see them come in all the time, road wise. Yeah, actually, there are companies that they got working for them. If there's a road leased to them, they own the road. You guys, county don't work on the road at all. County don't have to touch the road. They gotta keep the roads updated. I mean,
That's another thing we'll have in the ordinance is, they'll be required to have, any developer that's proposing a project will have to do what we call a road use agreement with the county. And it'll allow the county engineer to review any proposed construction routes. They may have to do widening of certain intersections so they can make the turns for like turbine blades.
You'll be tearing up a lot of.
Yep, and so then they'll have to do a pre-assessment of the current conditions of the road at that time. When there's an application being received. And any damage they make, they'll be required to repair that, so it'll either be as good or better than one typically, so.
Oh, yeah, I can't say enough bad about Bilstein when they did this. Bilstein was a hell of a good company. One of the better ones, one of the better ones I worked with. So,
Yeah, why don't you, at the end of the, when we're done here, come up and I'll take your phone number, how's that?
sounds cool.
Thanks.
I have somebody who might be interested in had asked about when they remove the turbines. They were wondering about the recycling part of it, what gets used, what.
Sure,
how-
sure, and
Or,
On,
or even.
yeah, I've talked to, the hole is 16 feet deep. And I don't remember the yardage of concrete, but when they go to tear it down, they either cut off the top 6 feet or 8 feet and then fill it in with dirt.
yeah, typically, so this is most typical when it comes to an ordinance requirement, right? All infrastructure at least 4 feet deep
Right.
has, and they can go further.
Yeah, I think
Usually they'll
My
make an
paper
agreement
said,
with,
my paper said 8, I think.
yeah, they'll make an agreement with a particular landowner.
Yeah.
So sometimes they may desire further down. Typically, I've never seen a developer have issue with that. So that's the most typical requirement. As far as like recycling, if one of the developers wants to, feel free.
And just, recently in Lynn County, Cedar Rapids area has a recycling plant for wind energy, for wind.
For the blades.
So this is more of an information.
Lynn County has one now?
Lynn County
Okay.
has
Okay.
manufactured
For blades.
for blades.
Yeah, for blades, and I
Yeah.
think, I wanna say there's one in like Fairfax.
That's it.
That's it.
Oh, that is it, okay.
That's
Shit.
Lynn County.
Duh, okay.
That's why it's.
I think I would know that, I'm from Delaware County.
So how do they recycle the plates? What do they do with it?
So they take, we can take the blades off after the 30 years or so of the project. Right now, they can take about 95% of it right now. They put it in the factory, they use some science that's above my head, but they can break it down and use it for other manufacturing purposes.
Okay, but not new blades.
No, no, because they won't build the new blades from scratch, that they're all up to.
Yeah, and usually new blades, you know, they can't be really, they've had wear and tear, so they can't really be repurposed for the purpose of a wind turbine. The concrete typically is crushed up and used for like aggregate for road projects. Steel is usually, all the steel is usually required or is recycled. Just speaking from my experience, when there is NextEra Energy, Tom's company, has a project south of Clear Lake. There used to be 55 smaller turbines that south of the lake up there, over there. And it was at the end of its life. It was one of the first like large scale wind projects in Iowa. And they redeveloped it with 16 larger blades, but it had the same power output. So the redevelopment, not really a repower, if you will, take your terms as you will, I guess, but all the steel and metal parts were recycled, all the aggregate, or like I said, all the concrete was recycled for aggregate. Blades, unfortunately, at that time were not ready for recycling, so they got landfilled, unfortunately, I believe, although I don't know if you got repurposed later on.
I don't know right offhand, but yeah.
But, yeah, so pretty much, I believe all the materials besides like chemicals, if there is any, like lubricants maybe, got recycled to my understanding, so. Yes.
I guess I have a question for the developers. What's in it for the developers? And is there any benefit to the electric consumer? We've heard all about the landowners and the easements and the tax revenue for the county, which gets passed on to schools. What's in it for the developer?
Can you state your name?
I'm sorry, Angie Johnson.
Yep, please say your name, I guess, sorry. Is anyone of the developers in the room care to answer, is that all right?
I mean, my answer to that, I mean, we do own the turbines and we would own the energy that is produced by the turbines. We're able to sell that energy. We are a business and that's why we would be, you know, primarily in this industry is to sell that energy and to make money off that. I would say that wind industry in the projects we've done throughout Iowa, the, you know, 16 that we've done, that Invenergy has done in Iowa, you know, we always stretch for win-win-wins everywhere, right? The landowners that host our projects, the communities that are surrounding, and then we want a slice of the pie as well of selling our energy too. And
So it doesn't result in lower electric costs for the electric consumer.
So I can't speak for project by project, but I will give an example of Mid-American Energy, you know, so the biggest utility in Iowa. We heard from Will Doherty, who's a project developer here last session. And they have the 5th lowest electricity prices in the country. And most of their load comes from generating wind energy. And so that just demonstrates that wind energy is cost effective and creates electricity rates that are lower.
Can I also ask the lifespan of, like, those turbines last, what, you said 30 years-ish?
So
How long does it take to pay for it?
the easements in our project are 40 years.
Okay.
But the turbines typically last about 20 to 30. And then we hope that there would be like a repower or something later on where that the 40 hours would free. Anyway.
Yeah, that, and technology changes too. I mean, it's a cost benefit, you know, at some point they may get more powerful, create more energy on a smaller platform or a bigger platform, and that's when you gotta weigh the value of whether you reinvest. Similar to what we did in Cerro Gordo, you know, we had 55 turbines, we dropped it to 16 with the same power output. And that was only like, I think in like 15 years. So you can imagine how fast technology works, that these things can change. From a power perspective, what has been really interesting in the industry is just to see from a larger grid perspective what's going on. I mean, as power comes off line, coal plants, renewables are an option to the major users. And so they're looking to that as an opportunity. So, yeah, I mean.
Well, we want to save the earth, right? We reduced our coal use, but I was just wondering, and then my other question is, how much of it is paid for by government subsidies? And what government, state government, federal government? Does that vary by area?
There's numerous tax benefits, and I'm not gonna hide from those. I mean, I think it's very apparent that there's been government subsidies included in the recent legislation. That being said, most industries, I mean, there's a lot of subsidies in almost everything. We would be doing it but for subsidies. I mean, we would.
You wouldn't be doing it, but.
We would.
You would still be doing it.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. No question about it. You're gonna see that over time, the amount of plant closures are gonna require that there's new ones coming on board. And this is something that works well and it's been proven. So you're gonna see more of it. And if you look across the state, I don't know how many exact developers there are, but there's a number of developers. Iowa's one of the best states in the country to develop wind energy. That's why we're here. There's a resource that we want to harness.
I wasn't trying to be accusatory.
No,
I need to know for myself so that I can have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think, you know, a lot of information gets thrown around.
Well,
and politicized.
people
And
in
I'm not saying-
discussions are, you know, sometimes.
Yeah, I think they're great. What I'm saying is I think you're asking great questions because we don't, you hear from various sides and that sort of thing. From the ordinance standpoint, that's not my concern on whether.
Right.
Turbine companies are making a profit or not. We wanna properly regulate the uses. But I understand that the public has questions about those things, tax benefits, what's in it for the developer. Those are very important questions. And I think the developers are very open to answering those questions. They have been in this process. So feel free to talk with them and they can answer as they see fit. Yes, sir.
So, Mike Carter again, Bright Future Iowa. I've been a policy geek for 24 years. There are subsidies in every form of energy, gasoline, oil, coal, and there are in renewables as well. So That's just a fact, but we use those incentives to incentivize the type of behavior that we'd like to see. Wind has, especially in Iowa, has held rates steady. You will never see rates go down. It's one thing that never drops. Yeah, but they don't rise as fast, and like Mid-America has the 5th lowest rates in the country. That's amazing. That's why we're getting data farms and all these other people wanting, and corporations wanting to come to Iowa to set up shop. We have that great Iowa work ethic, but we have low utility rates, which is a cost of doing business. And this is farming is a business, utilities is a business, and everybody, we live in a capitalistic society, so, if everybody is, is balanced, then it's a good deal for everybody. And, one thing I have seen, and you were talking about where does electricity go in these farms, well, some of the developers are gonna sell the electricity with a power purchase agreement. Other developers have a contract to sell the wind farm to a utility once it's done. That happens a lot too, so Mid-American Energy, Alliant Energy, sometimes they develop their own project, but other times they buy projects from a developer, so you'll see that too.
Good point, thank you.
Just as a point, I have some acquaintances in California, farmers. And right now I'm paying 9.6 cents a kilowatt through REC. They're over 30 cents out there. The power off there is just, they're just choking. They can't afford it.
Anybody have other questions or comments?
I just wanted to, my name's Tom Trahern. I'm with NextEra Energy. We're looking at a project in the county as well. These projects take a lot of time to put together. So we appreciate the work that's being done. I would encourage folks, if you have questions about what's being regulated, I'm hoping that the work session that you did, John, is online, because I think there was about 2 hours where you specifically went through and talked about all of the specific things that are included in an ordinance typically. And there was a really great example of the things that'll be covered in the ordinance. And that would be well worth.
It's not online right now. Our IT guy, he's gonna see if he can split it. And then at our super meeting and that meeting here, that meeting we're talking about.
I think it was the
And there's a
first,
half-hour gap with break.
I think it was the first one with the,
It was at the EOC.
yeah, the EOC.
So the December 20th one?
Yeah.
Yes, so the video, audio was horrible.
Oh.
So we have a recording of it. So you're not seeing any PowerPoints or anything like Isaac had some PowerPoints on that one, I believe. You're not seeing those, but good audio on that recording, that's uploaded.
Yeah, and did you get a copy of that PowerPoint that they presented at all? Is that available?
We can submit those documents again.
Yeah, we could put that on the website if you're okay with that. Yeah. There you go. Yep, so.
Yeah, and just from the perspective of NextEra, we want to see a balanced ordinance. We want to see something that we all can work with and live with and develop a project that everybody's happy with. When I talk to folks, I mean, we want to be able to walk down the street with a NextEra shirt on and not feel like, we brought something to the community that was bad or negative. So, we're here to explain, like, if something comes up and it's not a workable ordinance, we'll let you know and we'll talk through it and see if there's ways that we can get around it. But we've developed 12 other projects across the state. So we've got a track record. We're in Saragordo County. One of the questions that comes up a lot is decommissioning and what happens afterwards, what the farm fields look like, how that works in the future. We have a good example of that west of Clear Lake, where we've taken out turbines. Be happy to, if there's folks that want to come and talk to us about it, or if you want to bring in our maintenance people and have a conversation, be happy to have them come in and talk as well. We want to be as transparent and open and throughout this process as possible to create a project that everybody can be happy with. So anything we can do, appreciate it. I got cards. If you want my business card, I'd be happy to show it or give you a copy of it. You can contact me. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. Just let everybody know that we're here and we're trying to build a great project.
There any further comment?
Yeah.
Sure.
So, Scott Larson again, live along Flood Creek. What do you guys do for environmental, standards for migration of birds, waterfowl? That type of thing, is there setbacks, bald eagles? We have a bald eagle nest, not more than 900 feet away from our house.
So we go through US Fish and Wildlife Service, they review everything we do bird and bat avian studies. We get out ahead, there's a lot of requirements that we're required to adhere to, and as well as submit as a part, I'm sure they'll be part of the application as well. But we do work with all the regulations that are required. You know, we try to be sensitive to floodplains, wetlands, natural areas. They're generally regulated by the setbacks. And the ones that have been talked about have been the typical ones we see.
Another, I'll let Isaac speak now, I'll kind of elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, just to add to that, agreed with everything Thomas said, and then we also do a formal review with the Iowa DNR. So then both of those organizations, you know, we work hand in hand with them to inform, you know, recommendations and like changes to our layout so that, you know, every project area is going to be as unique as the environmental conditions of that area, which is always different. And so like every single project area will have its own conditions. We have been to many, you know, Inventory has done so many projects throughout the country. We have gone to project areas where we've pulled out after that because of the environmental constraints there. We're hoping from our preliminary due diligence on this site, that that won't be the case and we'll be able to build a project, but.
So you're building north and east of North Springs, is that
So-
correct?
We do have a project map that I can send out to whoever wants. I just ask me for it and I can provide it it's in my presentation we were talking about with the one I'm sending to Gloria. Our project area is south and west of Charles City.
Okay.
And so we're a little bit, you know, further south. We don't go as far up by like Rudd.
Okay.
So yeah.
Just kind of elaborate.
Next year.
Yeah.
But you do,
We're up north.
okay. So how far north, I mean, what are you looking at for?
Well, that's the thing, we're still in the infancy, trying to figure out land leases, and so it takes some time to put together the amount of acreages that are necessary for a project.
How many are you looking at putting in then?
How many?
Windmills are you turbines are you wanting to put in?
So we would, minimum we would want to do is a 200 megawatt project. Could be bigger if we have enough land leases. Yeah, but.
So you tell me megawatts, but doesn't tell me how many windmills.
Well, it depends on the technology, but let's just say it's a 3 megawatt, so it's 3 megawatts and that's about where.
All right, got it.
And just a
2.282.
I apologize. So like, during our last workshop, we had a couple developers or utility companies actually, but they also do development too. Alliant did a presentation on various topics. One of those was environmental, actually. Did a great job of just kind of explaining, some of the environmental things they consider. And then Mid-American kind of, went through high level, like what do they go through? And they had a list of all the various species studies, endangered species studies that they put together. Just generally just kind of listed it out. Gloria reminded me, I was trying to get they said they would provide a copy of those PowerPoints, so we'll try to get those on the website as soon as possible. So I'll try to get
Well,
those.
just so people have information about that, you know, I know someone.
Yeah, and that's why we did
about it,
those
but
workshops.
You don't ask
too.
questions, nobody knows them, nobody hears it.
Absolutely, and that's partly why, in our earlier times, we were getting some concerns about the questions, I guess, about environmental, how's that regulated, that sort of thing. Typically, most of that is from the US Fish and Wildlife Service, as Tom was alluding to. Locally speaking, there may be some applicable requirements in the ordinance that we may consider. One of those is like setbacks from public park, wildlife area, wildlife management area. Those are state DNR lands usually. Another thing is state floodplain regulation, also is kind of related to that as well. So there'll be a floodplain review for any, potentially, if I doubt they would locate a turbine near a floodplain, but if it's kind of adjacent to a floodplain, it's gonna get reviewed at the state level and locally. For those requirements, and then if they're boring under like a creek or anything like that, that also gets reviewed. That sort of thing. So those are some potentially applicable things, so, yeah.
Just just a comment, one of the things that happens as we start to develop a project, a wind project, we have to study the wind, so we put up temporary meteorological towers. I don't know if you guys have them up now or not. We've looked at siting one of those, and so we have to go through the process to site those. Generally, before a project's built, they're called temporary, they're a two-year time frame for those to be placed. As a part of the project, there will be permanent ones placed as well. So I don't want that to be a surprise if we're talking about these ordinance conversations, then all of a sudden you see that, well, wait a minute, they're putting up this meteorological tower out in the middle of the field and what's going on? So those do come ahead, and that provides us an opportunity to do the wind on a more specific level. So just so everybody's aware and understands that there's a process and we have to go through that process. They're temporary in nature, and we work with private property owners to put those up and such. So I know that could come off as we're in the middle of an ordinance and all of a sudden you see this request for a conditional use permit for a meteorological tower and you're wondering what's going on. That's why we ask for those ahead.
Yeah, and also just kind of transparency's sake, Mark talked about the moratorium. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mark, those meteorological towers are not wind turbines. So those were exempted to allow developers to at least like pursue research or prepare their projects. So they're not, because we're not intending to stop any project, we're intending to regulate the use, right? So no, so that should just be very open about that. Those are not exempt, those are exempted from that moratorium. So the NextEra and Invenergy would be free to apply for those conditional use permits, if it's before the end of that moratorium. I don't know if they will, but those will be regulated separately through the conditional use permit process.
I got a question.
Sure.
For you two guys. How does it happen that, you got a gentleman's agreement that you won't go south and he won't come further north, or how does that happen that you're both working in Floyd County?
I don't really have an answer for that, except that the resource is good. I mean, that's north
I mean,
central.
wouldn't you try to take his and he's gonna try to get at your territory, or why is there competitiveness that way? How come you're respecting each other's guys?
Honestly, I think from the perspective, I think originally it just happened that way. I don't think it was anything outside of that, to be honest.
I think our goals are very aligned, right? I think we're both responsible developers. There are other developers out there that kind of give our projects a bad name. And I think that NextEra and Invenergy being the two like biggest in Iowa, we're able to be aligned on responsible development and following rules as we should. And then picking our projects, it's like where landowners will sign up their ground, where they want us to go, and then where there's available transmission on the grid and where there's strong wind resources.
Jim, one thing I can add also, NextEra has project development areas where Invenergy is not there at all. Invenergy has project areas where NextEra is not there at all. It's frankly probably just a coincidence that in Floyd County that we're adjacent and are signing up acres. I mean, it's the luck of the draw that eventually, if you have X number of companies developing in Iowa, eventually they're gonna end up with two developers in the same county. I mean, in Adams County, which we have, there's a different developer down there. I can't even remember their name, but you know, there are numerous situations where there are more than one developer working on a project in a county Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't.
And I'm sure John can speak to Cerro Gordo. There's so many. So,
We had 4 or 5.
But I think you were the only one in Chickasaw recently.
yes, as far as I know.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
I think one thing that advantages our area is we have some pretty good transmission infrastructure, so it makes it easier to hook up. So, yeah, where you have better lines and things like that, for example, we have the ITC Midwest line that goes from southern Minnesota down to Franklin County, so that's specifically designed for wind energy. That was developed after the Clear Lake Farm was first, put in. So that, and then that allows, power to go easier to different areas as it's needed, So,
Okay, thank you.
that's one thing.
Which one's in Saragona County? Which one is in Saragona County?
We have a project.
You
in
got
there.
the Ventura one then, don't you?
Yeah, we repowered it, but we went from 55 to 16 turbines over there on the west side. There's a lot of competition in Saragona.
So who's got the Forest City area then, out of you guys?
Next year's got a project up here, Lake Mills Forest.
Up by Boone then, or no, up by, Buffalo Center, which one we had the Buffalo Center project?
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I don't know about that one.
There's at least a dozen developers in Iowa, and then if you throw in solar, it probably gets closer to 15 to 20. Some of these, developers will wind and solar, and other ones will just specifically be in wind or solar.
Then we'll be doing, once we're completed with the wind and battery storage, we're gonna be doing solar thereafter, because solar is actually starting to become in demand in Iowa. Saragona County is also considering a solar ordinance as well. They're in that they're doing it simultaneously. We're splitting it up just to be a little bit more focused in Floyd County here, so that's also coming, so we'll have a similar process as well.
I have a question. Is there ever a time that there's just too many turbines? What's the most turbines you ever see? A lot of the counties are approximately the same size. Was there ever too many wind turbines? Or what's the largest in a county?
Producing more than you get out of the area. I mean, like that would, the grid has a lot to do with how much power could go on to the grid.
Yeah, there's areas in northwest Iowa that have the best wind resource, but they have no transmission available. So they're full until they get more transmission. And transmission is harder to build than a wind farm or a solar. Because you're starting to deal with eminent domain and a few others.
Yeah, and another thing is, so the developers in the room know this, if you don't have anywhere for it to go, you can only go up to as much power as that's needed. In Iowa, obviously we have that ITC Midwest line, there's a proposed project called Sioux Green, to go along the Canadian Pacific Railroad, that's gonna be an underground line, so they may go, I don't know the status of that project, that's a private project, but they propose to connect the transmission regions. So there is potential for power to be shipped, and you've heard about that, but if wind turbines are located here, those tax dollars are here, and that sort of thing. Benefits and cons, as as you may perceive, there's always pros and cons with anything, of course, but we're here to regulate it, obviously, but that is a possibility in the future. Yes, sir.
Are either one of you going to the Sioux Green, you know of?
No, not at this
Think
point,
so?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, same here. We don't have any plans on it, and I haven't talked to anyone.
I'm mostly aware of it, again, I was the zoning guy for Saragona County, they talked with us, but I have no idea if and when that will ever happen, so. But
So, one more thing about transmission, because transmission is harder to site. One of the things that we have some right of ways that are very available to transmission, and those are railroad right of ways and also interstate right of ways and highway right of ways. You've got a big, broad section of land that if you run transmission either over it or under it, and you're not crossing anybody's fields, you're not, so they're there, they're muddy. Iowa law currently doesn't allow that, I believe, but they're working on it, and I know they're working on it and a lot of that sort of thing in surrounding states.
So how are you gonna deal with the CO2 pipeline that comes through?
I'm not, that's not my business. I don't
You
know.
know, I mean, how are you guys gonna deal with that?
Well, that's the reason I support wind and solar energy is because it's a property rights issue. It's your property and you make the decision.
Mhm.
CO2, we don't deal with it because it deals with totally different issue. It's through utilities. Solar and wind energy by law, and Mark will say that because we were, as a legislator, we made sure that it was a property rights issue. So tomorrow, if you say no, but your neighbor says yes,
Mhm.
the two energy companies most probably will go to your neighbor's place and not you because they want to respect you.
Mhm.
So that's what. So.
But still, they're still gonna put a CO2 pipeline if they get it through and it gets approved. You got your transmission lines. How are you guys going to deal with the transmission lines that you have versus the CO2 pipeline that's coming in? Who has the right of way when you're crossing line? That's what I'm saying.
You have to go to the utilities
You-
board.
I mean,
to ask
you've
that
got a lot of
question.
stuff going on here.
I will utilities. That's how I will do it. That is not, no. That's not true for what I'm doing, so.
So, the people that do sign leases, do they get paid regardless of whether the turbine turns or not? So, but do they get paid more if it turns more? Or is it just like, you know what I'm trying to say?
Our property owners pay by energy generated.
Yeah, right.
I don't know how other leases are formed, but that is not the way our lease
It's
is.
just a set amount every year, whether it's running or not
It's more
running.
to other, yeah, it's not based on the production.
Okay.
Yeah, and to confirm too, our leases are different than their leases, so they'll be slightly different, but, our payments are based on capacity of the turbine rather than energy produced. So if like a turbine is a 3.1 megawatt turbine, you get paid per megawatt.
So I'm thinking, if we've already got all the energy we can use, we can't get rid of more, then are people gonna get paid less because, don't have a way to use or ship the energy.
Does anybody else have any questions? Do you have your hand up? Oh.
I would have one I'd like to ask these power guys, so.
Are you guys okay
Like,
with that?
one would be an example, how many, this is a farmer friendly, so how many are in a fence line? And why aren't they pushed to be in a fence line to be somewhat friendly to farming?
I would say, every project's different and every landowner has their own needs as well. Part of our easement agreements, is a site plan review. And so we work with landowners in an iterative basis to see where turbines can go. And as our layouts shift, and our setbacks are known by our studies and all that, the turbines are kind of reveal themselves in layouts. Our Chickasaw project, for example, had like 45 iterations and 45 different layouts, to get to the final, end. We definitely take landowners, in the considerations of signing those easements and siting the turbines.
So how many were in a fence line to be in friendly in that aspect, out of the 56 or whatever you got?
We got 66. I couldn't tell you how many are in the fence line at that point. Feel free to go up there and drive around and look, and I could definitely talk to you about.
Didn't see very many in the fence.
Okay.
And to add on to Isaac's comment in regard to that, Larry, one of the reasons that some of them might be not in the fence lines, like, if you drive up and do the Barton Farm up in Worth County that we live, most of those are in the fence line. But if you have a non-participating landowner and you got a setback distance in a, either a development agreement or by county ordinance, you couldn't set them in the fence. You would have to go back from the fence line in order to accommodate a non-participating landowner. So I can't speak specifically about, you know, where they had non-participating landowners that didn't happen to butt up with a fence line with the participating landowner, but that would certainly affect the numbers that could be in fence lines.
And also, each turbine only takes up less than half an acre when including access roads. So say you got 100 turbines, maybe you're only taking 50 acres out of land that's not used for corner beans.
But you took 3 acres out of a half-mile run towards non-friendly for a farmer. If you have to farm. That's why I don't see hardly any.
Well, that's what the compensation is, right? That's why you have the land leases to pay them. They're gonna make a lot more on the land lease than they will on corner beans.
Depends on whether you're the guy farming around.
Yeah, I'm not sure which,
I do have a brief there that very few are in a fence line. It makes it unfriendly for farmers. I think it would be much more receptive if they was towards a fence line, even though that fence line might leave, at least an attempt would make it much friendlier to a farmer who is farming the land.
yeah,
I have a comment for that, McCann wants, so
sure.
I own ground where Invenergy is going to, go. And the guy has come out and talked with me, and in response to you, if the neighbor does not want you, or does not want the wind farm on them, so you have to have your setback. And so in my talks with them, they want me happy. So yes, the windmill might have to be in my ground, but the access road can go right up the fence line. And that's basically what they're doing, is they'll put the access road up the fence line. And then to make it as easy as possible for me to farm it. And the compensation more than makes up for access road and coming at it. So, I mean, all the talks I've had with them so far is they want you happy. And they'll do whatever they can to it, but they can't go right on the fence line if your neighbor does not want to. If your neighbor is fine with it, well, then they could make it there. So in your instance, maybe the neighbor does not want a windmill there, so they cannot go on the fence.
And then from a requirement standpoint, like Brian, you said? Ben, I'm sorry. Yeah, there will be we'll have some, requirements, like when I summarize setbacks, there'll be a setback requirement, from a non-participating property line. So if, for example, if you were a participating property owner and you had like multiple 40s, where you had fence lines, I mean, you have to obviously, this would be a private agreement, so you have the right as a property owner to negotiate your desires, and if it doesn't work for you, you don't have to sign up with them. But we will regulate setbacks from non-participating property owners. Sometimes they'll have like agreements with certain property owners, where maybe you might call it a good neighbor agreement, where they agree to become a participating property owner to make that part of the project area. So that setback doesn't apply for that property line. But I highly recommend, there's kind of a cross section of the regulation from the county and your private agreement as a farmer. And I totally sympathize with your concerns about fence lines and all that. So I'd always encourage you to not be forced into any agreement you're not comfortable with. There's certain things where the county can't really regulate a private agreement. That's more of a question with an attorney. But we're trying to hit the major potential impacts, with this ordinance. So I guess just speaking from the ordinance side, that's what we're aiming to do. So hopefully that's helpful. And but yeah, so there is definitely that cross section of a private agreement versus the ordinance itself and how it's regulated at the county level. So. Any other questions or comments? Border Commission? I guess with that, we can close.
Yes, just a reminder, the next joint meeting of the zoning commission, and the board of supervisors is Wednesday, the 21st at 6 P.M. in the Emergency Operations Center at the Floyd County Courthouse. Same thing again. Just another listing, folks.
We appreciate everybody coming and hopefully we'll see you next week if you have further. Thank you, everybody.
Is there a motion to adjourn? All right, there's a motion by. Casey, second by Jordan, to adjourn.
I forgot that we even did that.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I want to tell you what we're doing. Because your question about. They were gonna cross